I want you to mentally picture a geopolitical map of the world as it stands today. Just like, think about the massive tectonic fault lines out there.
Yeah, there are definitely some huge divides right now.
Right. You have the United States and China, and they're locked in this intense, really era-defining strategic rivalry over technology, trade, global influence.
And then, of course, you have the United States and Russia.
Exactly. Standing as, active adversaries. So for most countries, this is a world of rigid lines, strict camps. The overwhelming pressure is to pick a side.
You're either in one camp or the other. That's the traditional expectation anyway.
Right. But right in the middle of this map, there's one country actively shaking hands across all of those fault lines. One country that sits down for high-level tech talks in Washington, flies to Moscow to secure defense hardware, and then, joins a multilateral summit alongside Beijing.
Which, on paper, looks like a complete contradiction. In a fiercely polarized international system, trying to operate in everyone's orbit usually just ends up making you entirely isolated.
Because everyone expects loyalty. Right.
Exactly. Major powers tend to demand loyalty. And ambiguity, well, it often breeds deep mistrust across the board.
And that is exactly what we are unpacking today. So welcome to this custom-tailored deep dive. We have a really fascinating stack of source material today focused entirely on India's Strategic Balancing Act.
It's a really complex web to untangle.
It is. Our mission today is to decode New Delhi's foreign policy. We need to figure out if India is just naively trying to keep everyone happy until the whole act falls apart, or, and this is the big question, if there is a highly sophisticated, high-stakes strategy behind all these apparent contradictions.
Right, because if it's the latter, we are looking at a real-world geopolitical chess match.
Yes, a chess match where the outcome is going to actively shape the global balance of power for the rest of the 21st century.
To really understand the mechanics of this chess match, though, we have to look past the surface-level stuff, past the photos of diplomats shaking hands for the cameras.
Right, the photo ops don't tell the whole story.
Not at all. India's foreign policy is driven by this concept called strategic autonomy. But the issue is that observers often misunderstand what that term actually means in a modern context.
Like they hear autonomy and just assume it means isolation.
Exactly. They assume it means isolation or some strict quiet neutrality where a country just pulls up the drawbridge, and ignores the outside world.
Which is definitely not what India is doing.
No. The reality of India's strategy is the exact opposite. The core question we're exploring in these sources is how India attempts to cooperate with various deeply opposed powers without ever becoming strategically dependent on any single one of them.
So to understand where India is now, we kind of have to look at their historical baseline. During the Cold War, India was a leading voice of the non-aligned movement.
Yeah, that was their defining stance for decades.
Right. And the basic premise back then was a refusal to join either the American capitalist bloc or the Soviet communist bloc. But that specific world just doesn't exist anymore.
Right. The entire geopolitical structure changed.
Yeah. The Soviet Union collapsed. The U.S. became this unipolar military dominant force. And now China has risen as this massive economic and military powerhouse right on India's border. The entire board basically got flipped.
The rules of the game changed completely. We are moving into an international system that is incredibly fragmented.
So the old playbook just doesn't work.
Exactly. The old-fashioned Cold War era non-alignment, where you've simply refused to participate in great power competition, that is just no longer a viable survival strategy, especially not for a nation of India's immense size, its geographic vulnerability, and frankly, its global ambition.
Okay, so is modern India essentially acting like a highly sought-after freelancer?
Freelancer? How do you mean?
Well, instead of refusing to sign any contracts at all, which is what they did during the Cold War, they're now signing non-exclusive contracts with everyone, to maximize their options.
Ah, I see what you're getting at.
Yeah, they secure a critical technology partnership with Washington, but then they maintain a legacy defense supply chain with Moscow, and they participate in a trade bloc with Beijing. They are actively maximizing their client base without ever becoming a full-time employee for anyone.
That's a really good analogy. Yes, they are essentially building a massive gig economy foreign policy.
A gig economy foreign policy, wow.
Yeah, and just like a freelancer, the goal isn't isolation, it's multi-alignment. That is what modern strategic autonomy looks like in practice. It means engaging everywhere all at once.
So they're just spreading their bets.
Exactly. The sources show how India cooperates with Washington on securing the Indo-Pacific. But then it cooperates with Moscow on energy, it works with Japan and Australia, and simultaneously engages China on regional forums.
Which looks totally contradictory from the outside.
Right. It only looks inconsistent if you expect them to be a full-time employee of one specific alliance. But as a freelancer, it is a highly deliberate attempt to maximize their leverage. They don't want to choose a permanent camp. They want to radically increase their ability to choose on a case-by-case basis.
Well, if they're signing contracts with everyone, we definitely have to look at their most high-profile partnership right now, which is the United States.
Yeah, the U.S. relationship has transformed dramatically.
Completely. The sources detail a massive, really unprecedented level of cooperation happening between Washington and New Delhi right now. We are talking about deep coordination in the Indo-Pacific.
Focusing heavily on maritime security.
Right, which means actively securing the vital shipping lanes that run through the Indian Ocean. Plus, they're exchanging advanced technology, integrating their defense sectors, and sharing highly classified intelligence.
And the centerpiece of all this is the Quad.
The Quad.
Yeah.
The strategic dialogue between the U.S., Japan, Australia, and India.
This cooperation is driven by a very real shared concern about the shifting balance of power in Asia, specifically the rapid expansion of China's maritime influence.
Because China's Navy is just growing at an unbelievable rate.
Exactly. So for the United States, India is this indispensable geographic and demographic partner in their Indo-Pacific strategy. And for India, the United States offers access to crucial advanced technology.
Like semiconductor manufacturing and AI, right?
Yes, AI cooperation, capital investment. The relationship has deepened in ways that fundamentally alter the security architecture of the region.
Okay, but here's where it gets really interesting. You look at the Quad. It's the U.S., Japan, Australia, and India. They're partnering on maritime security, critical tech, and everyone knows this coalition is designed to counter China's influence.
That is the unspoken or sometimes spoken reality of it. Yeah.
So isn't the Quad just an Asian NATO? Like, how is participating in a four-nation security dialogue with America and its closest allies not picking a side?
India's answer to the Asian NATO assumption is a definitive hard no.
Really? A hard no.
A very hard no. And the reason lies in the actual mechanisms of the partnership. The Quad is explicitly not a mutual defense alliance.
Yeah, okay.
Right? There is no equivalent to NATO's Article 5. There is absolutely no treaty obligating India to go to war if Australia or Japan is attacked, and vice versa.
So it's a partnership without the military handcuffs?
Precisely.
Yeah.
India engages in the Quad for strategic signaling, to coordinate diplomatically, and to secure its own maritime backyard.
But no formal alliances.
Exactly. By avoiding a formal treaty-bound military alliance, India ensures its foreign policy doesn't just become an extension of Washington's. Because the moment you become militarily obligated to another great power, your strategic autonomy basically evaporates.
Right, you're locked in.
You're no longer making independent choices. Your defense posture is tied to a bloc leader. India wants American intelligence and technology, but it absolutely refuses to surrender its freedom of action in a crisis.
Well, if they're so terrified of military dependence on Washington, that completely explains why they refuse to sever their oldest defense pipeline, which is Russia.
Yeah, the Russia relationship is the major sticking point for the West.
We are talking about a deep institutional relationship that goes back decades. India's military heavily relies on Russian defense equipment. Everything from fighter jets to tanks.
The legacy systems are everywhere in their armed forces.
Right. And on top of that, there is massive energy interdependence. The sources highlight India buying immense quantities of discounted Russian oil right now.
Especially since the war in Ukraine started.
Exactly. They buy it cheap, refine it, and use it to fuel their own massive economy. But the U.S. is putting intense pressure, even threatening secondary sanctions on countries maintaining economic ties with Russia.
This is where the balancing act becomes a geopolitical tightrope walk. For decades, Russia was the only partner willing to cooperate with India on highly sensitive strategic technologies.
While Western nations were flat out refusing, right?
Exactly. You do not just erase decades of integrated defense supply chains overnight.
Yeah.
The hardware, the maintenance schedules, the institutional memory, it is deeply embedded in the Indian armed forces.
You can't just swap a Russian tank for an American one in a week.
No, transitioning away from that takes decades, not months.
Okay, let's unpack this, because something isn't really adding up for me. India's biggest long-term strategic threat is China, which is exactly why they are in the Quad with the U.S. But right now, Russia is becoming incredibly close to China.
Yeah, the no limits partnership.
Right. So how can Russia still be a strategically useful partner to India? If push comes to shove, won't Russia just side with China?
You've just hit on the most profound strategic complication facing New Delhi today. The geopolitical landscape has completely shifted under their feet.
Because Russia and China are so tight now.
Right. India's relationship with Russia can no longer be viewed in a vacuum. It is now inextricably linked to the broader Russia-China dynamic. Indian strategists face the incredibly harsh reality that their oldest, most reliable defense partner is now deeply intertwined with their primary continental rival.
That is a terrifying position to be in. You're relying on a defense supplier who is basically now a junior partner to your biggest competitor.
It is extremely precarious. But understanding that dynamic reveals the underlying mechanism of India's strategy here. India maintains economic ties with Moscow, like buying all that discounted oil, specifically to prevent Russia from falling completely into Beijing's orbit.
Wait, really? So it's intentional?
Yes. Think about the flow of money. By purchasing Russian oil with billions of rupees, India provides Moscow with a financial lifeline that isn't denominated in Chinese currency.
Oh, wow. I didn't even think about the currency aspect.
It's crucial. If India walked away entirely, Russia would have no choice but to rely 100% on China. Beijing would be able to dictate the price of Russian energy and effectively turn Russia into a vassal state.
Which would be a disaster for India.
Exactly. By staying engaged, India buys Russia a tiny bit of independence, keeping a wedge, however small, between Moscow and Beijing.
Wait, you're saying India keeps Russia close specifically to maintain a wedge between Moscow and Beijing, but that requires India to actively deal with Beijing too. How are they managing that dynamic when they have a literal contested border with China?
It's very tense. The border skirmishes are a constant threat.
Yeah, the sources are very clear that China is India's principal long-term strategic competitor. They have massive border standoffs, and China just has a vastly larger industrial base, a rapidly expanding military, a powerful navy.
They're projecting influence all across the Indian Ocean region.
Right, in India's backyard.
The disparity in economic and military weight is something New Delhi is acutely aware of. China is deeply embedded in global institutions and possesses the kind of immense hard power that forces every neighbor in Asia to react.
Right, and here's the ultimate contradiction in all of this. India is actively participating in the Quad with the U.S. to counter China's rise, but simultaneously, India is sitting right alongside China in BRICS.
The geopolitical bloc with Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa.
Yes. They are literally sitting at the same table with the competitor they are actively trying to contain in the Pacific. It sounds like, sitting on the board of directors of a rival's company.
That's a great way to put it.
Like, you don't necessarily like them, you are competing with them in the open market, but you absolutely need to be in the boardroom to see what they're planning and to make sure they don't vote you out of the industry.
What's fascinating here is that we frequently conflate competition with total confrontation. In a traditional Western framework, if you are competitors, you just don't sit in the same clubs.
You ice them out.
Exactly. But competition does not preclude diplomacy. India needs BRICS as a diplomatic platform to engage other major non-Western powers and to have a loud voice in shaping global governance.
So it's about having a seat at the table.
Right. Participating in a non-Western group does not mean India is anti-Western. It means India is actively preventing the international system from being completely dominated by any single bloc.
I hear that, but practically, how does that even work? China's economy is vastly larger than India's. By participating in BRICS, isn't India just lending credibility to a Chinese-led anti-Western bloc? Are they just sitting there nodding along?
Not at all.
How do they actually stop Beijing from running the show then?
By acting as the internal counterweight. If India leaves BRICS, the organization simply becomes an uncontested vehicle for Chinese global influence.
Oh, so they have to stay to block them.
Exactly. By staying in the room, India dilutes China's dominance within the organization. India aggressively champions the interests of the broader global South, ensuring that non-Western grievances aren't solely owned and directed by Beijing's agenda.
That is a really delicate game to play.
It's a highly sophisticated hedging strategy. India competes with China militarily through the Quad, but uses BRICS as a diplomatic mechanism to stabilize the relationship and prevent that intense competition from spiraling into an uncontrolled conflict.
So what does this all mean for the future? We have India balancing the U.S. through the Quad, managing Russia through energy purchases, and hedging against China inside BRICS. But this isn't just about day-to-day survival, is it?
No, it's about a much longer trajectory.
Because the sources point to a much bigger game being played here. Where is this multi-alignment actually leading?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it all points to one massive, overarching ambition. India's ultimate goal is not to be a highly favored junior partner to Washington, nor is it to be a subordinate to Beijing.
Okay, so what do they want?
India's objective is to become a distinct pole in a multipolar world.
Yeah.
They don't want to choose a side between East and West. India wants to become a side.
Oh, wow. They want to become a side. That is a massive paradigm shift.
It changes everything.
But, I mean, to do that, you can't just send out a press release declaring yourself a major power and asking everyone to respect your autonomy. You need leverage.
And that is the crucial evolution of modern Indian strategy. Decades ago, their autonomy was mostly diplomatic positioning. It was just a vocal stance. Today, the autonomy they seek requires immense, tangible national power.
Because words aren't enough anymore.
Exactly. You cannot play this high-stakes balancing game if you are weak. A weak country announces neutrality and, frankly, prays no one steps on them.
Right.
A powerful country actually possesses the weight to make independent choices and force larger powers to respect those choices.
So to truly be a pole, a distinct side, India needs hard assets. They need their own domestic defense production so they aren't completely reliant on Russian legacy systems or American tech transfers.
They need indigenous capabilities across the board.
Yeah, they need technological independence so they control their own digital infrastructure. They need diversified energy sources so a blockade doesn't crash their economy. And above all, they need a highly credible, modernized military that can actually project power across the Indian Ocean.
Diplomacy only works when it is backed by actual capability. If India wants Washington, Moscow, and Beijing to respect its independent decision-making, it has to possess enough internal strength that none of those relationships are a matter of sheer survival.
So they can walk away if they have to.
Exactly. They want to be in a position where they cooperate out of shared interest, not out of desperate necessity.
But building that kind of sweeping national power like retooling an entire defense industry, securing domestic energy grids, modernizing a massive military, that takes decades. And the world is incredibly volatile right now, which introduces a massive ticking clock to this whole strategy.
This raises an important question about the inherent danger of multi-alignment. It is a brilliant strategy on paper, but in practice, every relationship you build creates expectations.
And people eventually expect you to deliver.
Right. Washington expects India to push back harder against China's maritime expansion. Moscow expects India to remain a reliable economic lifeline. Beijing expects India to refrain from joining any formal anti-China military coalitions. And the Global South expects India to be its champion on the world stage.
And eventually, those expectations are going to violently collide. I mean, imagine a sudden catastrophic global crisis, say a massive military escalation in the South China Sea between the U.S. and China, or a severe escalation between Russia and NATO that forces a complete global embargo.
A true worst-case scenario.
Yeah, the music stops. Suddenly, the phones in New Delhi are ringing off the hook. Washington is on line 1 demanding an embargo. Moscow is on line 2 demanding support. Beijing is watching every move. You can't just be a freelancer anymore. You have to make a call.
That is the ultimate test. Strategic autonomy isn't truly tested during peacetime when you can attend everyone's summits and sign non-exclusive contracts. It is tested when major powers are at each other's throats and demand a decision.
When the pressure is absolute.
Yes. The true definition of strategic autonomy is not the ability to avoid making difficult choices. That's impossible in a global crisis. True autonomy is the ability to make those difficult choices based solely on India's national interests, without being coerced, blackmailed, or paralyzed because you rely on one of those powers too much.
So to bring us back to the core question we started with, can India stay friends with everyone? Can they keep shaking hands with adversaries forever?
The short answer is no.
Right, but friendship is entirely the wrong metric anyway. Nations don't have friends. They have overlapping interests. India's goal isn't to be liked by everyone. It's to understand where interests align, to cooperate in those specific areas, to compete fiercely where they conflict, and to manage that competition so it doesn't become catastrophic.
They don't need perfect, frictionless relationships with Washington, Moscow, and Beijing. They just need sufficient strategic space and internal power to deal with all three on their own terms.
If you are listening to this, you might be wondering why a diplomatic balancing act halfway across the world really matters to your daily life. It matters because India's strategy is going to actively shape the global economy you operate in.
It touches everything.
It does. The success or failure of this multi-alignment will dictate the security of global supply chains, the routing of international trade, and even the technological standards we all use. If India succeeds in becoming a true independent pole, the unipolar world of American dominance, and the looming bipolar US-China Cold War, that all gets disrupted entirely. We get a multipolar world, which is vastly more complex.
It changes the calculus for every major global issue, from international trade routes to technological decoupling. India's internal success or failure in building this power will ripple outward to affect the entire international system.
Which leaves us with one final, very provocative thought to mull over. We've talked entirely about statecraft, military power, and diplomacy today. We've established that true strategic autonomy demands overwhelming domestic strength and economic resilience. But here is something else to consider.
The wild card.
The ultimate wild card. As climate change ravages the Indian subcontinent over the next 50 years, potentially forcing mass migrations, severe water scarcity, and devastating agricultural impacts, will India even have the luxury of strategic autonomy?
It's a huge question.
Can a nation act as an independent pole on the global stage if the harsh realities of a changing planet and internal resource scarcity force them to seek massive external aid? Will extreme environmental pressures ultimately force them to pick a side just to survive?
It is a profound vulnerability that could completely upend their entire geopolitical chessboard.
Definitely something to keep in mind as you watch the news going forward. That's all for today's deep dive. We will catch you on the next one.
Thank you for joining us on this Strategic Vanguard podcast. If you found value in this analysis, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. We bring you fresh podcasts every Monday here on YouTube and Rumble, and you can also catch the audio versions on Spotify and Amazon Music. Just search for Strategic Vanguard Podcast. For more insights, articles, and discussions, subscribe to our blog at strategicvanguard.com. Your support helps us grow and bring you more in-depth analysis on defense, geopolitics, and strategy. Until next time, stay informed, stay strategic.